Hello, Create Schools. As promised, here is the second installment of the Cuban Missile Crisis, part of the Chapter 5 Containment Policy. And this one I've entitled 13 Days. There is a movie that you could watch if you're interested. It is really good, and it takes you through day 1 to day 13 and really give you an idea, a feel of what it felt like and all the tension. What happened because the whole world was worried that a nuclear war would start because of this Cuban Missile Crisis. Go ahead and pause this video and write down these notes. Get out your pencil and paper. When you're ready, join me on the next slide. Okay, so why did the Soviets place missiles in Cuba? As promised on our background video, I'll explain exactly why it's worrisome that the missiles were placed in quasi-America's backyard. So if you remember that political cartoon I showed you in the last video with Cuba basically reaching into the Americas space. At that time, missiles had certainly certain range. Nowadays you can push a button and basically missiles can fly all around the world and stop anywhere you want. But back then they had long-range missiles and short-range missiles, and you locked your target on, you pushed the button and it flew from one point to the next point. And so short-range missiles, it would take 10 minutes for a short-range missile to land up to here. So here is the capital. So here are all of these areas that a short-range missile can bomb within 10 minutes of exploding. Or they can place long-range missiles, which is the furthest they could, and that would destroy the majority of the United States. So it is really worrisome to the United States that the USSR was so easily to be able to destroy the United States. So they really did not want missiles in Cuba. So why did the Soviets place the missiles in Cuba? Well, basically, if you remember, after the United States did the Bay of Pigs invasion, Castro asked Khrushchev to please help them, and so they decided to put these missiles on there to defend Cuba. Now also, America had missiles in Turkey, and if you don't know where Turkey is compared to Russia, go ahead and pause the video and pull a map up and take a look. It's not very far. The long-range missiles could definitely get a lot of Russia. And so there was also the arms race. If you remember, we talked about that in the Korean War, the arms race. So if Russia has their missiles in Cuba, it helps with the arms race. It makes it look like they're even better and they have even more weapons, and it also shows that they are very strong and powerful. Okay, so those are some reasons why they might have placed weapons in Cuba. So go ahead and pause this video and take those notes down, and I will go to the next slide. So the 13th day, the crisis begins. So basically in October 1962, 30 Soviet ships went to Cuba with nuclear weapons. Okay, so here we've got a little nuclear weapons in Cuba, and the United States being very, very worried and very worried what's going to happen. So Kennedy, he saw this with spy planes, and he had to make some decisions. What was he going to do? He basically believed he had 5 options. He could do absolutely nothing. He could have a surgical air attack. He could make an invasion. He could have some diplomatic pressure, or he could make a blockade. Now in the next slide I will explain what all 5 of those mean. So if you don't quite understand, don't worry, just list the 5 options now. Then, like I said earlier, there's a lot of American towns within range, so they were really worried that they basically would not have enough warning, because like I say, a fourth of the United States can be destroyed within 10 minutes. So that's quite fast. Okay, so pause here, take these videos down, or take these notes down, and we'll go to the next page and I will explain those 5 options to you. So, were Kennedy's options good? So I'll fly all the 5 options in here and explain it to you. So he could do absolutely nothing. So the USA had more weapons And so they were capable of destroying the USSR even more. So remember, they would be MAD, mutually assured destruction, in order for Cuba to actually launch any missions. So it actually doesn't really matter that the weapons are there, because we also had weapons in Turkey. So why would Khrushchev do nuclear weapons onto us if we can just do it to them and then we're both destroyed? So he could just do absolutely nothing. So our next option, we could destroy the missile bases by the use of an air attack. So this is a strategic air attack. So they would fly in and they would only attack the bases where you would put the nuclear weapons. So what the nuclear weapons just can't be like launched from anything. They had to build something in order to put the weapons. So if you think of a rocket ship going into the air, it isn't just launched from the ground, it isn't just lying on the ground and then launched like a helicopter. It actually has to be placed with something in stands. And so the Americans could come in and destroy all of those bases, and that way they wouldn't be able to have weapons so fast, but then again the Soviets could retaliate and destroy some of our areas. So that maybe is not necessarily a good idea. So let's see the next option. We can invade Cuba both through the air and the sea, and it would get rid of two things, both the missile bases, and if we invade we can get rid of Castro. But the Soviets said they were defending Castro and would help him. So if we attacked Cuba, then the Soviets would probably turn around and attack us. So that maybe is not a good idea either. So the fourth option, we could discuss it. So back to moral persuasion. We could talk about it and figure out what to do and have a discussion, and maybe it would avoid any conflict. But it might also show us being weak. So maybe that wasn't a good idea. And the fifth one, we could form a blockade so the Cuban boats couldn't get by. It would show that we were bold. We wouldn't be attacking. Then if Russia would attack us, then they would be starting the war, not us. And so maybe that would be a good idea. So let's see what we chose. You can go ahead and pause the video here. Take these 5 options down, and we'll move on to the next one. So, what did Kennedy do? He chose the blockade. So on the 24th of October, the blockade began, and Cuba was ringed by 100 warships. Okay, so here becomes the really confusing part. So, but don't worry, just kind of know that there's a lot of tension. Kennedy receives 2 letters. First one letter, and it says it's a very nicer, softer thing, and then Khrushchev sent a second letter just after that, and it was a lot meaner. But Kennedy decided, I'm not going to pay attention to the mean one. I'm just going to respond to the first one. And basically, everyone was getting tense. What was going to happen? And the Russian boats come towards the blockade. Everyone's worried that a nuclear war is going to start, but suddenly they turned around and went back. Okay, so basically, America won, quotes, you can't see me quoting, won this naval blockade because the bombs were not placed in Cuba. But what happened then is Kennedy and Khrushchev talked, and they came to an agreement. So maybe the diplomatic relationship might have worked on option number 4. They came up with an agreement that the USA would then remove the weapons from Turkey, and also that Khrushchev, the Soviet Union, was going to defend Cuba if Americans did anything to hurt them. So the Cuban Missile Crisis was over. It only lasted 13 days, but those 13 days, the whole world, like I said, was basically worried that a nuclear war would start. Okay, there was a lovely political cartoon showing the presidents have their, we've got Kennedy and Khrushchev here, both fingers on the bomb to set the bomb out, and they're doing a little wrestling who's going to win. So lots of sweat. Again, nobody wants to push that button. That would be MAD, mutually assured destruction. Pause here, take these notes down, and I'll go to the next page. So what were the results of the crisis? Basically, Kennedy and Khrushchev decided to work together. this lovely political cartoon here. It says, "Let's get a lock for this thing." And they are putting the lid on the nuclear war weapon, trying not to let this fierceness come on. Khrushchev claimed that he'd achieved his aims of preventing the invasion of Cuba, but he was condemned from China for backing down, and it actually led to Khrushchev losing a lot of power. And so basically, after a few years, he basically lost the majority of his power. Kennedy was praised for avoiding a war. He stood up for Khrushchev, but he did have to remove the weapons from Turkey, and he also had to accept that Castro would remain in Cuba and they would remain communist. Okay, Cuba remained communist nation, and they depended on the Soviet aid throughout the whole time. And the Cuban Missile Crisis helped to thaw out the Cold War. And actually, after this, all of this tension building up, that everyone was worried that a nuclear war would happen. Everyone basically was so relieved that the two powerful countries realized it really is mad, and that they could see that no one actually really wanted the nuclear war. And so there was a hotline, the red phone, and it was put between the White House, that's America, and the Kremlin, that is Russia. And so that way they could immediately talk to each other and say, "Hey, did you really mean to do this? Are you really starting to start a war? What's going on here?" So that way it has a little bit of calmness, and it doesn't have to go escalating straight to war. And then in 1963, they signed a nuclear test ban treaty. And this limited the amount of testing of nuclear bombs. So they're trying to pull back, scale back, to make sure that there was not so many weapons. Oops, sorry about that. So go ahead and pause the video here. Go ahead and take these notes down. And I've got one more slide for you after this. So I just wanted to show you right here we've got Khrushchev, who's acting like a dentist, plucking out the missiles from Khrushchev, and it says, "This is going to hurt me a lot more than it hurts you." Okay? And so basically the description of this, you don't need to copy this down, but here's the analyzation of this political cartoon. Khrushchev is in the form of a dentist. He's working on his patient, the Cuban leader Castro. In an agreement to end the Cuban Missile Crisis, Khrushchev agreed to remove the nuclear missiles the Russians put on the island of Cuba. 6 months later, President Kennedy removed the American Jupiter missiles from Turkey on the border of the USSR. This is just a lovely one. Like I said, the caption's not here, but the caption is, "This is going to hurt me more than it's going to hurt you." You don't need to copy this down. But if you have any questions, let me know. Hope you have a great day. Bye.